Fantastic. So, good morning, everyone who's watching this. My name is Alessandro Gerald, and we are here today for our EU40 talks regarding the US election. We have a distinguished guest. I'm very happy to have here with us Mark Watts, who is a former member of the European Parliament for the United Kingdom from 1994 until 2004. And Mark is also like the co-founder of LP Brussels here in Brussels, a consultancy. So we're both live from Brussels. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good morning, Alessandro. Well, I'm feeling a little bit tired, even though I've not been up all night. But the day, it's already seems like a long day to me already, and I think it's going to be a very long week.
It's actually an interesting night because yesterday night European time was the U.S. election, and we are voting for the new president of the of the United States. What are your first feelings, Mark, on this?
Well, I think I've got to distinguish my professional with my personal, and I'll explain why I think that's important. I think professionally, I try and maintain my objectivity. I try and open my mind to different opinions and points of views. And I think this is also very, very important. It comes with my politics, but also my experience, as you say, in business. But being bipartisan, being consensual, building alliances is crucial. So I've never viewed necessarily a Trump victory or re-election as the complete disaster. I think some on the centre-left view it. It's just a reality we have to deal with, and we have to work with whatever the American people pick. This is a democracy in action. We should be celebrating that. So professionally, I think we've got to accept the result and make it work. Personally, though, sure, my whole instinct is to favour a Biden victory, and to do what I can to bring that about, because I think instinctively that's better for Europe and above all for the world and the future. So yeah, personally, I'm rooting for Biden. It's going to be close, and indeed Biden may not win. But at the end of the day, putting my professional head on, we've got to work with whoever is in the administration. Just a final point, though. I think a lot of us in Europe see this in pretty black and white or red and blue terms. Even a Biden victory is not necessarily good news for Europe. It's not necessarily going to restore the old order that some of us, perhaps nostalgically want to, going back to the Obama or even indeed the Clinton days. The next few years are going to be incredibly challenging, whoever is in the White House.
Absolutely. So before getting back to your last point, which I think it's very interesting to understand why a Biden victory would still not restore the old order, let's say, I would like just to analyze with you what we were expecting and what the situation is right now. So I think that the breaking news right now is that we have no breaking news, in the sense that as of today, let's say the morning after the US election for us Europeans, we do not have a president of the United States declared. We've seen the comment of Biden, which said, we think we are going to win, and we think we are in a good state, which seems realistic. But also we are expecting exactly in this minute the speech of Trump, and with a tweet, Trump said it was a big win. So now, having no confirmed president as of now, what's your expectation? Like, what do you see coming? A Biden victory, would it mean that Donald Trump would not accept that? If that is the case, which seems to be, somewhat likely, how can we get out of that situation in that case?
Well, as you say, Alessandro, it's a very uncertain situation. I think we were expecting that this time in the morning, the results would be a bit clearer. I think, again, that some of that is wish fulfillment. We want that to happen, and therefore it will. When actually, if you look at the evidence, perhaps that was a wrong assumption to make. We have got Florida. It looks like Trump has won Florida with a slightly larger margin than Hillary Clinton. But as we know, it's very wrong to project from one state what's going to happen to very, very different states in, for example, the Midwest. So, it's frustratingly difficult to call this election. Both sides are saying that they're winning. As you say, Trump has claimed that he's won big, but Biden's saying he's won in places like Arizona and Georgia maybe, and the Midwest states that he needs to win. So it's very uncertain. I think what is unsettling for me, though, is that the amount of work and money that's been spent on opinion polling, which showed a pretty clear national lead for Biden consistently, but also leads in those key battleground states that he needed to win as well, including Florida, where he was ahead in the polls, and indeed, obviously, Wisconsin and Michigan and Arizona and elsewhere. I think what's disturbing is even the polls say that they've corrected for the 2016 mistakes they've made. It looks like they have not. So even if Biden wins, it won't be by a large margin, as the polls were perhaps suggesting. So I think we've got to have a real rethink about opinion polls once again, and the way that we view and react to elections. On your point about perhaps if Biden wins by a narrow margin, Trump not accepting the result, yeah, I think we are in uncharted territory here. And it's going to be an unprecedentedly difficult period for the US and for the world if there is a legal dispute over the election, which I suspect actually could happen whatever way it goes now. That's not good for America, and it's not good for the world. I mean, I just want to conclude on this point, if I may, on this question, that for me, though, these are the symptoms. The problem is America is an incredibly divided and polarized society. And that's the real problem. And I made this point to my Democrat friends and my Republican friends over the last few months, that what are you doing? What are you offering to heal that divide? And to be honest, we haven't heard a lot from either side.
I think that is a very fair point, and I think we also see that in Europe a bit. Politics is getting more and more polarized, even though in some countries like Italy, for example, there are movements or groups that claim that they are neither left nor right. I think that we see a divide in the population, and we see like more on an ideological basis rather than on the reality of the facts. Before diving into what we were just discussing, I would like to show you two graphs. I will just share the screen now. So this is the CNN more, let's say, realistic and conservative view, where Biden is given at 220 and Trump is given at 213. This is, let's say, they are calling in the various states as soon as they have real data that support the winning. So we see, for example, that Florida was given to Trump, but still Arizona, Nevada were still undecided. Whether if we look at 272win.com, which is a very interesting website, they call them according to the latest introductions, let's say, the latest data. And in here we see that if, as could potentially be expected, the latest is that Nevada is given, for example, to Biden, but Georgia is given to Trump. Well, if this is going to be the situation with Minnesota and Wisconsin and Michigan given to Biden, let's say rather likely, we look at 279 for Biden and 259 for Trump, remembering that 270 is the number to win the election. A super close call. And what I would like to know from you, Mark, is that if you remember any other election that was so close. For example, I assume that in the 2000 race with Al Gore and Bush, and you were an MEP back then. So how was your experience as an MEP waiting in the European Parliament to know how the world is going to change? Because the United States are still looked at one of the most powerful economies, countries in the world. What is the perspective of a member of the European Parliament? What is the perspective of a close race like this?
Okay, well, I think it's incredibly important. I think people underestimate the relationships, the views, the connections between the European institutions generally and the US administration, but particularly the Parliament. I mean, the Parliament is a political animal. It's filled with politicians that have hopes, dreams, and fears, responsibilities, and voters. And there's a real affinity, I think, across the political groups with the US and the US administration for historical reasons, for cultural reasons, linguistic reasons, and above all for business reasons. I mean, they are by far our biggest trading partner. So it's incredibly important, that Atlantic relationship, and therefore the way in which Americans vote is closely watched by members of the European Parliament. Also, I think there's a selfish reason as well. I think we often think what happens in America could well happen next in Europe, and I think the rise of populism to some extent has is one example of that. The populist movements in the US and Europe feed off of each other, you could argue. There's also more immediate concerns like security policy in the Middle East towards Russia, China. So I think for European parliamentarians, America always has a special place, or when I was a member, a special place, I'm sure it still does, on the radar. It's part of our hinterland, even though it's a long way away. So for example, trying to get on the US delegation was nigh impossible, because it was by far the most popular delegation. You could argue committee is even more important than most of the committees, to get on the US delegation and get the opportunity to work with American colleagues. The example of that Bush-Gore fight was a very good one. It's a bit of an analogy with this one. We were obviously at that time rooting for Gore. We thought on issues like climate change, but also peace and security, it was very important to get a Gore administration. Of course, in the end, it went down to the wire, to the voting processes in Florida, and whether to accept some votes or not that hadn't been properly validated. So yeah, absolutely, we were watching that through the night and beyond as that panned out. But in the end, I think the Democrats, and Gore in particular, act in a civilized manner. They conceded in the end. There was a legal dispute, but it was handled in a very civilized way. My fear is that won't happen this time. So we should look back in history, but I think the world has actually changed. I think this is an important point. In my day, although there were strong differences of opinion between the different political parties, different political groups within the parliament, and in terms of our international relations, there was a lot of mutual respect. And I think that mutual respect between colleagues of competing parties, we've lost that, and the world is poorer for that. And it's a symptom of a malaise in society, where we show less respect for each other as citizens. So yeah, I think we've been through this before, if you like. And of course, the story is quite dramatic, because George Bush did indeed go on to win the presidency. And of course, that was a very dramatic presidency, as we know, because of obviously Afghanistan and above all, Iraq.
Yeah, and this is exactly why it's not a race between two people. It's really like a race between two kinds of United States of America and the world itself, because obviously the decisions that a country like the United States take affect the entire world. On a different note, though, Mark, no matter who wins, either Biden or Trump, the president of the United States, the next president, is going to be 70 plus. It's going to have more than 70 years old. So now my question to you, as if I recall correctly, you were one of the youngest MEPs in 1994 when you entered the European Parliament. Do you think there is a problem in that? You know, I fight and struggle every day to claim that we can't do politics excluding the young generations. And, you know, with the U40 and the young MEPs, this is exactly what we try to do. 1 out of 3 European citizens is under 30 years old. So what is your take on the fact that the two candidates are let's say, in their late stage, and what is your take on youth in politics?
Yeah, well, thank you for that very important question. As you say, I was elected to the European Parliament at the age of 29. In fact, I took my first elected office when I was 22 as a member of my municipality. So I got involved in politics very, very young, partly because, and you've obviously touched on it, I wasn't happy with a society, a community, or in my case, my county, being run by mainly old men. I think there's a place for everyone. We should have a diverse institutions, and representatives should be diverse too. So we need young, middle-aged, and old. Like we need we need men and women, and we need people from LGBTQ plus communities as well. We need everyone to be represented, and that's my point. It's not that we're against old people. It's not we're against people in their 70s standing for the presidency, but the voters need a choice. So our representatives represent and reflect society. And I think we clearly have a problem in American politics where it would appear younger people, and they do feel excluded from the political process and the party processes as well. But I think it's also true here in Europe. A lot of younger people, as we know, feel very, very disengaged from the political process, and they use other forms of expression, such as the climate change protests on Fridays, where school children have been striking and going on demonstrations. So yeah, we've got a real crisis in politics in Europe and the US, that young people don't find it a very attractive place. And I'll just say this, that age discrimination is still not really a thing. And yet it is a discrimination. Discriminate against someone on grounds of your age is unacceptable. That's true for the older people. It's true for younger people too. And I would say growing up in British politics as a 20-year-old, I encountered a lot of discrimination and indeed ridicule. It was a hostile environment almost was created, not just for me, but any young person entering the British political parties at that time. Probably true, not so different now across Europe. That's unacceptable. And it's true for other groups in society as well. We've got to address that. It's almost the unspoken thing that people under 30s, people under 40s are not treated with respect. And it's not treat me with what I believe, what I have to offer. Don't judge me by my age. And I think that's really, for me, the lesson in life. I say that's true for older people as it is true for younger people. So we've still got to fight the good fight, to get more young people involved in politics, and above all, in the work that we do here in Brussels, get more younger people involved in the European institutions.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for that. I fully agree with you. I don't think it's a question of age per se. I think we should try to tackle the underlying paternalism that there is for young people, that they are claimed not to be enough or not to be experienced enough to be part of the political discourse. It's not really a fight against the 70 years old. Although I believe that having two presidents that are at that age, two candidates, means that the choice for the voters is limited to that, and that I think that we saw it with Obama, who was a young, rampant candidate, aside from being African American as well. That played also his young age at the time played also a nice role. So, Mark, before concluding, I would like to ask you one more question. So now we do not have a president per se, but soon enough we will have a president, and hopefully, let's say, the process will be smooth enough to know exactly who in next January is going to be the president, and without big turning tables, that is going to be the choice. My question for you is the following. With the Trump administration, we saw transatlantic relations taking somewhat of a drift. Now, I let up to you to judge how much of a drift that was. What is the likely scenario with Trump winning again? What is the likely scenario with Biden winning, so having a Democrat president, for the EU-US relations?
Okay, well, I think it's going to be a challenge, but challenges are also an opportunity, and I think there are two ways in which we can handle it, and it's almost irrespective of who wins, because America is a divided society. It's going to be more divided than ever before, whoever wins this race. So one, we have a responsibility as Europeans. We need to step up to the plate and to promote a greater economic sovereignty as Europeans, boosting our own economy, our own resilience. And we've learned that particularly in the pandemic. We need more European resilience for our economy. That means a level playing field. It means treating people fairly. It doesn't mean protectionism, but we need to boost our economy and invest in our economy and our skills. Secondly, we need to invest in security. Personally, I think it's wrong that for decades we've been relying on the Americans to bail us out. They've done a great job. It's not their job or responsibility or duty. It's ours. We need to step up to the plate and meet those NATO targets for spending. And thirdly, our values. We should be proud as Europeans to project our Enlightenment values of civilization, of equality, of solidarity. And we should broadcast that to the world, that Europe is a place that we are proud of. We've built it after a bloody Second World War where millions died, and indeed a First World War that started here in Europe. So we've got to project that to our citizens as well. And then when it comes to our American friends, irrespective of who wins, we've got to build bridges. And I know that's a cliche, but however hard it is, however difficult people may be, however different they are, we have to build closer relationships with the White House. And that's built on mutual respect, which as I said earlier, seems to be a concept that is disappearing from the public discourse. I think we as Europeans have got to bring that back to the public discourse. Be proud of our beliefs, but respect the views of others. And I think in that spirit, we will work well with Biden. But I think we also have to accept we've got to try harder to work with a Trump 2 administration, if indeed that is the choice of the American people.
What a nice way to conclude our conversation. Let's try to be the enlightenment for this, and let's try to build bridges. I think this is a fantastic way of concluding our conversation. So, Mark, thank you very much for being with us today and for bringing your point of view. For anyone that sees this video, might you be interested in deeper analysis, please feel free to go to the CNN, to 2070 to go. And also, if you want to check something interesting, check LP Brussels. They have done a very nice series of discussions over the US elections, and I think you will find a lot of information. Thank you, Mark, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Goodbye.